Welcome to Ask Dr. B about music theory. I have a question on melody harmonization, which comes from lesson 21, and it's from Giovanni, who writes, "How do you memorize all the possible chords? I have to write out the triads for each chord for the scale to figure this out. Is there a trick to memorization?" The answer is yes. There are some great tricks and tips that I can give you. And let's just make sure we understand when the question is about melody harmonization. So let's say that means we'll just pick a key signature here, A flat major, and let's say the melody note given is the note C. So we're in A flat major, as I mentioned, and when you look at any pitch, you can say, well, if it's the root of the chord, what's the triad? If it's the third of the chord, if it's the fifth of the chord, what will your triad be? And I'm limiting myself to triads because the majority of music is triad based. So I'll be fine with everything else, seventh chords and etc. if I understand my triads. The rest will come easy. So let's start there. And so if this is the root, that means that I have C, E flat, G. And I write the lead sheet symbol. Because I'm not writing in Roman numerals at this point, I don't want to have to say, well, what is it in the key? I just simply want to know what it is. Okay, so if I harmonize this, and this C is a root of that chord, it's a C minor triad. Yes, can melody notes be non-chord tones? Certainly possible, but when I write it like a whole note like this, we know that we're going to want to actually have it be part of the chord. When you have a melody that's with faster note values, then yes, it gets a little more complicated and you have to decide, well, is this pitch going to be a chord tone or a non-chord tone? But again, when we have something that's as long as a whole note, we say, how do we harmonize this? Step one, we can say what member of the triad is it? So let's say that this is the third, which means I'm going to go a third up, that's going to be the fifth, and a third down. Now, one of the things that's going to help with memorization is noticing patterns, and we're going to talk more about this. But I know that, if this pitch is on a space, I go to the next space up, that's a third up. Next space down, that's a third down. And if the note was on a line, the next line up is a third up, and the next line down is a third down. So pay attention to those patterns and will help speed things up. I look at this, I know that it is an A flat major triad. So we have that option. Now this C could be the fifth of the chord, in which case I need to go down a third and then down another third, which creates an F minor triad. So I may have analyzed these triads a little bit faster than you can, but you can always pause videos and rewind and look at that. But how do I get to let's say you're not there yet. Well, how do you get to that point where you're able to do that quickly? And let's be fair. Speed counts when it comes to music theory. I've often had students who, I give a quiz or an exam. We get to the end of the time and they're, "Dr. B, I didn't finish. Can I have more time?" The answer is unfortunately no, because speed counts. Speed counts. And what will happen, and the reason they need more time, is because they haven't really got all their basics down. So they might not even know all their major scales really quickly. And so they're trying to figure that out as they're doing the exam. And you just don't have time to do that. You need to memorize certain things such that you can do the more advanced level jobs fast. And memorization is not a bad thing. Some people get really, I'm not good at memorizing. Well, memorization doesn't have to be something as hard. Just like everything, there's tricks and tips to be able to do it more efficiently, do it faster, do it better. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. So let's get into that. So let's talk about, well, what do you do? What do you do? So the first thing I recommend you do, we're going to go down here to this next staff, is write out all diatonic triads for all keys. And there's 15 of them. I'm counting the enharmonic keys, so it's not just 12. We got our G flat, F sharp, and we need to know both and some of those other enharmonic keys. So writing out all the diatonic triads. So let's stick with our A flat major here. We have our key signature, we write that out. Then we begin by writing out our first chord. A flat, C, E flat. Now, I recommend you use courtesy accidentals. Now, courtesy accidental is usually used for performers to remind them of what the key signature is. So what we want to do for music theory, though, the reason we use that is that we want to make sure that we're not just we're learning both sides of it, not only the pitch letter name, but the exact pitch itself, whether it's flat, sharp, double sharp. We need to know that. So write in the courtesy accidentals. It will really help your mind latch on to the specifics it needs. And then you continue. So we go B flat, D flat, F. And before we do that, and let me make this just a little bit neater. So I'm going to talk about why neatness counts in a second. So D flat, F. Before I move forward, let's also put in a lead sheet symbol. So write the triad, lead sheet symbol. A flat major triad, B flat minor triad. We continue. C, E flat, G is a C minor triad. D flat, F, A flat is a D flat major triad. E flat, G, B flat is an E flat major triad. F, A flat, C is an F minor triad. And G, B flat, D flat is a G diminished triad. Step one. Now that might take you a while to do, and that's okay. But you write all those out, and you do it for all 15 keys. Put in the courtesy accidentals, you add the lead sheet symbols, and then we get to move to step two, which is you want to play it on the piano. Play and sing letter names on piano. Why would we do this? It's Dr. B, I don't know how to play piano. It's something to learn. All the great composers, Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, they all played a keyboard instrument. And there's a reason for that. All great musicians, all musicians should know the basics of piano or some keyboard instrument, whether that be harpsichord if you're back in you want to take a time machine back to the 15th century or 16th century. You should also sing. Everyone should sing, play piano, and contemporary-wise, I think everyone should play the drums. That way you've got melody, harmony, and rhythm covered. You got those foundational things learned. So you play on the piano. And the other reason you do that is because we as human beings usually have a stronger visual sense than our sense of hearing. Just think about it for a second. If you meet someone for the very first time, you're talking to them, you see them, if they were to call you on the phone that night and just start talking and not introduce themselves, you probably would not recognize them just from the sound of their voice. If they were just like, hey, how you doing? What's new? You wouldn't say, oh yeah, that's probably, you probably wouldn't do that. But if you were to see them the next day, you would probably say, oh yes, I saw you, I met you yesterday. Our visual sense and our visual memory is usually much, much better than our memory for hearing. So when you were a kid, and at this point most of you probably know the difference between red, blue, green, yellow, orange, but can you tell the different pitches by ear? The pitch C, D, E, F, like people with perfect pitch can? Maybe not, right? But your visual senses has no problem identifying colors, but your ear might have a little bit more of a challenge. So we need to work with what we know, right? And when you play the piano, you get a real visual connection to the music. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect all these different aspects of our brain. We're connecting the visual with the way it sounds, with the intellectual side of the theory, we're labeling it. We don't want to just be like, some pianists, they have great muscle memory and they can play all their scales, because they know the pattern that their fingers feel like. But they don't know, they couldn't tell you the letters and the names of the scales. It's not connected to their intellect, the intellectual understanding, the label. We want to connect everything. So what you would then do is you'd say, okay, I'm going to play and sing the letter names of each triad. I'm going to arpeggiate each. So you go, and you'd look at your hands while you're doing this. A flat, C, E flat, and you move on. B flat, D flat, F, and maybe you need to play the note first and then sing it. That's like so. C, E, E flat, G, D flat, F, A flat, and you go through that. You go through all of them, and then you move on to the next key, right? And you play and sing the letter names of all these diatonic triads. And you might say, Giovanni, you might be thinking, Dr. B, I asked for something that was going to help me, a trick to save me time. And, and you're just telling me to memorize all this stuff. Again, memorization is not a bad thing, especially if you're doing it the most efficient way possible. But let's think about it. Again, the idea is we want to save time. We want a trick, a way to do it more efficiently. And I draw your attention to, are we talking short term or long term? If you want to be doing music theory next year, still be involved in music and using these music theory skills. And if next year you still don't know all your 15 major scales down pat, and you don't really know all your diatonic triads down pat, and every time you're doing something in music theory, you're having to write those out, who's spending more time in the long run? The person who, at the beginning, does what I'm saying and memorizes all this and makes it second nature? Or the person who has to then keep writing down the little cheat sheet every time for the rest of their life because they never had spent the time on the basics? So I'm saying spend that time now. Do it efficiently. And I'll mention to you as well that neatness counts, okay? So you'll notice that when I wrote this, all of the note heads, they stack. They're nice and vertical, right? I'm not writing things like off center, like this. I'm not doing, they're not askew. And with the accidentals, I'm making sure the accidentals, they're right in front of the note. They're not a little too high or a little too low. I'm not doing that either. And the reason is, what I want my mind to take a photograph of this. I want it to lock in. Again, using our visual sensibilities as human beings, we want to have that as a mental picture in our mind. And I'll tell you a little story. So when I was in 11th grade, I had a friend who was a really good guitarist, still a great guitarist. His name Chris Terrell, and he took me under his wing, and he knew a lot more about music theory than I did. So we were in an American history class together, and every day in American history, we'd take out some blank sheet music, and we would write out all of our scales, all of our diatonic triads, all of our modes, and we would get done, and we would just, it would take us maybe a week to do all that, and then we would just do it again the next week and just write it out. And at this point, after doing all that for a year, I can close my eyes and I can see the sheet music. I can see the staff. I can see the notes. I can see the scale. I can see any of those scales. I don't have a photographic memory except for that because I had just done it. And that neatness counts, so that, if this is unclear, your mental image of it will be a little fuzzy, out of focus, unclear, right? So we want the clarity here so that we have the clarity inside with our mental understanding of it. So do that. Make sure that neatness counts. And let's make sure that we have that. Now, I do have to admit, my understanding of American music history for many years was shamefully ignorant. So I'm not necessarily recommending that's the way you do it, but you do need to put in that time, and in the long run, it will save you time. You won't be like one of my students who can't finish an exam because they're still trying to figure out their diatonic triads. And another factor to that is when you're dealing with more advanced music theory, where you have like step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's all pretty advanced. If you're doing step 1, step 2, and then you got to backtrack and figure out where your diatonic triads are because you don't really know them. When you go back to step 3 of the more advanced task you're undertaking, that's when you make mistakes. That's when you get confused. So if you're trying to compose something or do some music theory homework and you're getting frustrated and you're making mistakes and you're not doing as well, chances are there's somewhere in your foundation fundamentals that's not, either you don't quite understand or you don't understand quick enough, because you lose your train of thought if you have to backtrack and go over the fundamentals. So it's really worth it to get those fundamentals down pat. So when I write out all the diatonic triads in a key, it takes me about 30 seconds for one key. And essentially it's like I'm limited by how fast my hand can move, because it's all, it's a picture in my head. I'm just making my hand right. And so if we say, okay, well, how long is that going to take me for all 15? We're talking about 7.5 minutes. And I could write out all of this. And, if you want to up it and make it a little bit more advanced, and you want to put in the Roman numerals, you can do that. But again, I just want the basics. If you do the Roman numerals, you'll say, okay, Roman numeral uppercase major 1 chord, minor 2, minor 3, major 4, major 5, minor 6, diminished 7 chord. And you'll, again, notice patterns, right? In a major key, the sonorities are major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. You're always looking for the patterns and how they all connect. So I pose to all of you a challenge. Let's see how long it takes you. Can you beat me? I hope you can. But let's find out. Let's see how close you can get. And maybe it takes you 20 minutes. That's okay. That's when I was back in 11th grade, it'd take me almost a week to write out all this stuff that I'm talking about. But then I would start again and would go a little bit faster the next week. So time yourself. Get out a stopwatch, time yourself, and see how long it takes you. And then, to make it fun, why don't you post it? Make a comment, down below, and say, first try, 20 minutes. And then try it again and comment again and be like, second try, 15 minutes. See how close you can get to this. If you can get to like anywhere between 8 and 10 minutes, you're probably going to be fine. Get it down here, you're ready to give me a challenge and a run for my money. So I hope that helps, Giovanni. This is melody. Once all these fundamentals are down and really second nature, you're going to find that music theory is just so much fun. You won't find the frustrating. You won't be frustrated having to go backtrack and all that stuff. And you'll really be able to enjoy the process of learning new, more advanced music theory subject matters. So enjoy.